Ever feel like you need a map and compass just to navigate a government website?
Like wandering through some kind of digital maze just to find a simple form.
Well, it's like a national pastime at this point. Try not to throw your computer out the window when you have to renew your driver's license online.
It's the worst.
But you know what? It doesn't have to be this way. Back in 2018, Congress actually passed a law. Can you believe it? The 21st Century IDEA.
The Integrated Digital Experience Act. I know it well.
That's the one. And the goal, at least on paper, was pretty simple. Drag those clunky government websites kicking and screaming into the modern age.
The noble endeavor.
Right. Make them accessible, user-friendly,
Yeah.
maybe even, dare I say, somewhat enjoyable to use.
A lofty goal.
It really was.
Mm.
And get this, they didn't just stop at the make it better platitudes.
Yeah.
The 21st Century IDEA actually laid out 8 specific requirements for government websites, kind of like the 8 pillars of a modern citizen-centric digital experience.
These were designed to address those real pain points that people were experiencing every single day. Like, one of the key requirements was accessibility, especially for people with disabilities.
So important. Imagine needing to access vital government services, but you literally can't because the website wasn't designed with your needs in mind.
Absolutely. Or even just something as basic as being able to navigate a site with a screen reader.
The Act also really tried to tackle that issue of consistency across different agencies. So you're not like thrown into a totally different digital universe every time you switch from, say, the Department of Education website to the IRS.
Which happens all the time. It's like a million different looks, feels, logins.
Right. It's like the government finally realized that maybe, just maybe, having a million different logins and passwords for every single agency wasn't the most user-friendly approach.
And then there's the whole issue of, duplicated content.
Oh, tell me about it.
Because in the age of Google, who needs 10 different websites all saying the same thing? It's overwhelming. I just end up doing another Google search anyway. And don't even get me started on search bars that don't actually work.
Oh, the search bar. It's a tale as old as time, the holy grail of online navigation.
You'd think a functioning search bar wouldn't be too much to ask for, but here we are.
But one of the things I actually appreciated about the 21st Century IDEA was that it went beyond just those basic functionalities.
Oh, how so?
Well, they recognize that we live in a data-driven world. So they mandated that these websites should be designed around actual user data, not just what some government agency thinks people want.
So less guesswork, more actual data.
Exactly. They even had the foresight to include mobile friendliness back in 2018, which, let's be honest, was probably already overdue at that point.
Yeah, 2018, everyone and their grandma was on their smartphone.
Right. But still, it was in there. A good sign.
Okay, so good intentions, a focus on the user, even some common sense sprinkled in. You might be thinking, what could possibly go wrong? Well, this is where our GAO report comes in. You see, the law also required those agencies to submit yearly progress reports, kind of like a built-in accountability mechanism.
Sounds good in theory, right? Keep everyone honest.
You'd think. But as we're about to find out, the reality on the ground is a little different.
And that is where we begin our deep dive. So we've got this law, right? Trying to drag government websites into the digital light. A system for agencies to report on their progress, hold them accountable.
Sounds good, right? Accountability, transparency.
The cornerstones of good governance.
You'd think.
But
The GAO report we're looking at, it kind of throws a wrench in the works. Turns out those yearly progress reports, the ones that were supposed to keep everyone honest, well, they weren't exactly a top priority for every agency.
you're kidding. All that talk about a more transparent government, and they can't even file a simple report.
It's a little more complicated than that. I mean, for some agencies, yeah, they just straight up drop the ball.
Really? Like, how many are we talking about?
The GAO actually focused on 24 major agencies, the big ones, and they found that over a 5-year period, those agencies only submitted 70% of the required reports.
70%. That means almost a third of them are just MIA, vanished into the digital ether.
Pretty much. Some agencies offered explanations, of course. Lack of guidance, they said.
Lack of guidance after a law has been passed? Come on.
I know, right? It's like saying, we didn't know we had to follow the law. Hardly an airtight defense.
Okay, so what other excuses did they come up with?
Well, some claimed they simply didn't have enough progress to report.
Which, honestly, might be even more concerning. It's like, are you even trying?
Exactly. And even the reports that did get submitted, they were all over the map. Some agencies, super detailed breakdowns, charts, graphs, the whole 9 yards.
That sounds impressive.
Right. But then others, super vague, Barely any useful information at all. Like, good job, you submitted something, but it doesn't actually tell us anything.
So it's like trying to understand a complex issue with, like, half the puzzle piece is missing. How can you even get a clear picture of what's going on?
Exactly. And without a clear picture, how do you measure progress? How do you hold anyone accountable? It's like herding digital cats.
Okay, so the government's not great at doing its homework. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. But this isn't just about abstract bureaucratic processes, is it? Like, this
Yeah.
has real-world consequences.
100%. This is about people being able to access essential information and services, things that impact their lives in very tangible ways.
Okay, so hit me with it. Real-world examples. How is this lack of consistency actually impacting people?
Well, let's take the Department of Education, for example. Their 2023 report, it actually showed a decrease in their compliance with certain accessibility requirements.
Wait, a decrease, as in things were actually getting worse.
Not exactly. It turns out they had just changed the way they were categorizing some of their online forms, which, skewed the numbers a bit.
Ugh, the old moving the goalpost trick. Make it look like you're doing better, or at least differently, even if nothing's actually changed.
It's a classic. But it highlights the danger of this whole inconsistent reporting thing, because it makes it incredibly difficult to get a clear and accurate picture of what's actually happening. Are things getting better, worse, just different? Who knows?
So frustrating.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, people are left trying to navigate these digital mazes, just trying to access basic services.
And that's the real issue here.
So it's not all doom and gloom, right?
Yeah.
There's got to be some good news. You mentioned earlier that the GAO did find some bright spots, some agencies that were actually on the right track.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not all bad news. Amidst all the inconsistencies and missing reports, the GAO found that some agencies were really stepping up their game. They specifically called out a group of agencies designated as high impact service providers, or HSPs.
HSPs. Okay, so what makes a HSP a HSP?
Well, these are the agencies that handle really critical services, the ones that impact a huge chunk of the population. Think passports, Social Security, veterans benefits, disaster relief. Basically, situations where a clunky, frustrating website can have major real-world consequences.
Right, so these are the ones where you really don't want to be stuck on hold with customer service for 3 hours.
Exactly. And it seems like these HSPs, they were taking the 21st century idea a bit more to heart.
So were these HSPs like acing the user-friendliness test?
It wasn't all perfect, but many of them were making some really significant strides. One of the key takeaways from the report was that these agencies were actually getting smart about utilizing technology to improve their websites. For example, they were using things like GSA's Digital Analytics Program, DAP, to really understand how people were actually using their websites.
Okay, so instead of just guessing what people need, they were looking at the data.
Precisely. DAP tracks what people click on, where they get stuck, what they search for. It's like having X-ray vision into user behavior.
That's kind of cool, actually.
Right. They were also really stepping up their security game using things like FedRAMP.
Okay, gotta admit, FedRAMP doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. What's that all about?
Yeah, it's a mouthful. Basically, it's like a really thorough security check for government websites. So when you're entering sensitive information online, like your social security number or your banking details, FedRAMP helps ensure those websites meet the highest security standards.
So less worry about your identity being stolen while you're just trying to renew your driver's license online.
Exactly. And beyond the tech side of things, the GAO also found that these HISPs were getting much better at actually soliciting and incorporating feedback from users. We're talking about surveys, website evaluation tools, even monitoring social media to see what people are saying about their online experiences.
Wait, the government is actually listening to what people are saying on social media. Now that's progress.
I know, right? It's a welcome change. They're finally moving towards a more user-centered design approach, which is incredibly encouraging to see.
That's great to hear. So it's not just one agency figuring out how to build a decent website in a vacuum. They're actually working together to make things better for everyone.
Yeah, it's a collective effort to improve the digital face of government, which is how it should be, right?
Absolutely. But what about that whole lack of oversight thing we talked about earlier, with the progress reports and all that? What's being done to address that?
Right, so you'll be glad to hear that OMB finally issued more detailed guidance on the 21st century IDEA requirements at the end of last year.
Better late than never, I guess. But will that be enough to actually make sure agencies follow through?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. But there's more. They're also exploring some really interesting things like automated scanning tools to help assess website compliance more efficiently, less reliance on those self-reported progress reports.
So less trust us, we're doing great, and more the data doesn't lie.
Exactly.
I like the sound of that.
Me too. And this whole deep dive into the 21st century idea, it's really highlighted a critical issue of our time.
Which is holding the government accountable in the digital age. Because this isn't just about, making government websites look pretty.
Right. It's about ensuring equitable access to vital information and services for everyone. It's about building a government that is truly responsive and accountable to the people it serves.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, there you have it, folks. It's a bumpy road to a more user-friendly government, but there's definitely hope on the horizon. A huge thank you to our expert for walking us through this digital labyrinth. And to our listeners, remember, your voices, your experiences, they matter. So next time you encounter a terrible government website, don't just sigh and accept defeat. Report it. Provide feedback. Because together, we can nudge those digital dinosaurs into the 21st century. Until next time, happy navigating.